Greetings, Soulbound warriors, to the realm of fire, also known as Aqshy, as we continue our exploration of the mortal realms for the role-playing game Soulbound. This series is meant to help introduce you, new game masters and players, to the setting of Age of Sigmar, and get you ready to adventure within it. Today we're going to be talking about Aqshy, like I said, Realm of Fire, and I chose this one for two reasons. One, we pretty much have the most information about it from various sources, and frankly, it's the one that's focused on in the Soulbound core book, and so your GM of your group has more info available to them in case the story demands it. So if you throw a question out there about, history or geography, it's something that they can reasonably answer on the fly. All those things mean this is a fantastic place to start when it comes to Soulbound, and it does not fail to deliver. Aqshy has some of the biggest events in the history of the setting, and I cannot wait to get into it. Essentially, I want to break this video down into a few segments. What the geography is like, what the residents are like to help kind of fill in the NPCs, right? So you have a setting and then you have people in there, and then notable historical events, because that will matter when it comes to the dispositions of the NPCs and events that people would know and recognize and understand. Things of cultural importance. Now, I'll say this at the beginning of every video that explores every realm. They each have every environment or biome within them. Aqshy, even though it's the realm of fire, has snow-capped mountains and vast oceans, as well as volcanoes and such. Cubicle 7, the people who made the Soulbound role-playing game, and Games Workshop, the intellectual property owners of Warhammer, have done a wonderful job of fleshing out one continent in this realm known as the Great Parch. But understand, it is just one continent in this vast realm. So if you want to design your own, you have unlimited freedom to do so. But for this video, we're going to focus on what's presented in the books. Again, something your game master has reference for. So let's take a look and start exploring the Great Parch. To the west are the major regions of Batar and Asperia. Batar is a sprawling land filled with farming grounds and home to large forests containing one of the realm's finest exports. It's called fire silk. It's made from Aqshy spiders. They can use this material to create extraordinary fabrics that are cold in the summer, hot in the winter, and always in demand. Because this is a place of trade and commerce, largely uninterested in the favor or gifts of the gods. They're very practical people. Asperia, however, is a place that thrives on the arcane and the divine. This is the preeminent home of bright wizards, or wizards that focus on fire magic. Largely dominated by mage-ocracies. People of Asperia have always had a friendly competition going on with Batar. When I say mage-ocracies, I literally mean that the people who can wield magic are at the top echelon of society, and everyone down below them serves them. Asperian schools and colleges of magic, they need raw materials, and Batar, again the one we just mentioned, is there to provide. You have a merchant class, and then you have sort of a, like I said, magocracy who's constantly needing resources to be able to fuel their research. Asperia, though, is a place of discipline and learning and strict social hierarchies, right? Magic users rule, and everybody else lives in a lower class, sometimes as slaves, but not always. You could just be a lower citizen, but, the truth is, it doesn't mean that they're all, slaves and that kind of stuff. Where trade is the emphasis in Batar, sorcery is the currency and lifeblood of Asperia. One note, the city of Brightspear, which is a major location in the Soulbound starter set, is actually located in Asperia. And I have a video covering it in the description below, and I'll have another one coming out that kind of goes into more detail for game masters and players and that kind of stuff. Looking back at our continent map, to the south is Kull's Revenge, a land still largely controlled by the forces of chaos. Korgus Kull is the name of a mighty lord of Khorne, a servant to the chaos god of murder, bloodshed, and war, and Kull's Revenge is full of marauding warbands and inhospitable landscapes and unsafe travels. To the north is Golvaria, dominated by tall mountains and thick forests, incredibly thick forests. and it's also the home to the major port city of Anvilgard, whose unique environment is what makes life possible there. See, the forest, as I talked about being incredibly thick, it kind of grows over and is always encroaching on civilization until a local volcano in the mountain range erupts and burns the forest away. And while that sounds awful to build a city next to a suffocating forest and an active volcano that destroys it all the time, it actually helps the city because it, first of all, clears the wooded area and it brings fresh and important minerals out to the surface. Meaning, after the forests burn, the people of Anvilgard will go out largely and find mineral deposits and things like that, and of course, it burns away the forest so they have room to expand if they need to. This natural geography also functions as sort of a barrier to keep enemies at bay, and so that's how you can set up a city there. Lastly, as far as the Great Parch goes, to the east are the regions of Iridian and Capillaria. These are a bit harder to describe. Both have a lot of open plains. They're kind of bowled in by a mountain range, makes them a bit more unique as they're sort of the Wild West of the Great Parch, so to speak. There's no real superpower that controls them or unites them. These locations, back in the Age of Myth and so on, were dominated by tribal, nomadic societies as far back as time can remember. And honestly, not much has changed. Many have fallen to chaos, so there are enemies and villains there, but not all of them. It's just a place where a nomadic lifestyle kind of prohibits the building of major cities and things like that. Like I said, we're going to focus a bit more on Esperia soon, as well as we dwell on, the city of Brightspear, which is a big point in the narrative of Soulbound. But that's a very general overview of the Great Parch, and I'd like to turn and talk about some of the common traits that its people share. First and foremost, I want to say that the realm that a person lives in does have a subtle impact on them. The magics from these places kind of infuse into you on a small level, and so you will see some very common traits develop amongst their inhabitants. Again, there's all different kinds of people everywhere you go, but you're going to start seeing little similarities depending on which realm you're in. The people of Aqshy are known for their temper and passion, whether it's, battlefield aggression or even just bold politicians within city walls. These are people who revere light that burns the brightest, but also lasts half as long. On the whole, they don't care much for the elderly, right? Anyone whose time has passed, where the energy of youth has faded, people kind of phase out very quickly. This makes for some fantastically energetic heroes that are always ready for a fight and quick to get into a brawl, but the second they get older, they become like this forgotten relic, right? And so having NPCs that represent both of that, I think is a really great way to go for you GMs, right? Maybe there's an old man in the corner that nobody else pays attention to, but here's the thing, he's the oldest person in the room, meaning he knows the most about the realms, he's seen the most winters, he has wisdom that the others just simply don't revere. One thing that also unites every citizen of this realm is the search for water. You see, each realm finds itself in an abundance of something, some kind of basic resource. They have some stuff, and they need some stuff. In Aqshy, drinkable water is a rarity and is highly prized as such, which, if you're curious and you've kind of read through the Soulbound RPG and you're like, I don't understand this currency, there is a currency in this game called Aqua Girana, literally means water from the realm of life, which is called Giran. This is the currency of Aqshy. It is the life-giving sustenance that players need to be able to move forward. This can make for a fantastic challenge for players who need to constantly be looking for water or rationing it or using it as, like I said, trade currency. But aside from hot tempers, a lack of patience, or regard for the aged, Aqshy functions like most other places. They have cities and factories and farms and trade routes and more. The notable cities include Hammerhall, Brightspear, Anvilgard, and Tempest's Eye, all bustling with rich life and diversity of races and trades and all these kinds of things. And lastly here, I just want to touch on some of the important events. I feel like we went over, the geography a bit and then talked about the people and the residents. And now I want to touch on some important events that may have come up as folklore or points of interest that you and your NPCs and their interactions can all kind of relate to. Right? These are things that people would know or understand. First up, the god of the race of people called the Fire Slayers, which we will of course do a dedicated video to, their god's name is Grimnir, and he was lost in the realm of fire. You see, back in the Age of Myth, the Duarden, or Dwarven if you want to use that term, god went to blows with a mighty salamander named Volcatrix. The battle ended with Grimnir being shattered into thousands of shards of pieces of metal called gold. That's UR-gold. It looks like regular gold, but it has a little bit of the god's divine power within it. This event birthed the faction known as Fire Slayers, whose unending goal is to reclaim these scattered pieces of their god and sort of reconstruct him. And while gold can be found in every realm, most of it's in Aqshy. So Fire Slayers, you can go ahead and skip to your, that part of your Soulbound book. It gives a better description of that event, but it is something that people would commonly know. It's common folklore that at least that Grimnir was lost here. Now the next event is that during the Age of Chaos, when the 5 evil chaos gods really entered the realm in mass, the chaos god Khorne, known as the Lord of Murder, Battle, Bloodshed, he jealously wanted to claim this realm above all others. And so, while other Chaos factions can and do exist here, by far the most common enemy you'll see in marauding warbands that are dedicated to Khorne. And so essentially the fiery nature and the impetuousness and all that intensity is something that really spoke to this chaos god. And so he's like, I want that place. And so instead of spreading his troops out equally, he has a huge concentration here in the realm of fire. This is also important that things will, with stuff that NPCs would know, is this is the location of the first city founded after the Age of Sigmar began, right? When the forces of good came back into the mortal realms to establish, draw a line in the sand and establish some civilizations, this was really the seed of it all. Hammerhall is a mega city of near impossible scale, but it's also an unending source of conflict, narratives, and excitement. In fact, the entire continent is important as it's one of the 3 locations that Sigmar reopened the war for the realms with. He opened gates in Aqshy, Giran, realm of life, and Chaman, the realm of metal. So you can absolutely see why NPCs would have sort of a, kind of an uppity attitude of oh yeah, well, we were the first, the first founded kind of a thing, as if there's some sort of preeminence to that. And we'll talk more about Hammerhall. It is an incredibly interesting city, probably the most unique amongst them. But I think for the time being, I'm going to focus on pretty much what Cubicle 7 gives you as game masters and players in terms of narrative information. So we're going to focus on Brightspear next. And with that, I'll conclude today's video. The real goal, if you haven't noticed, is that we are zooming in from introducing you to the mortal realms as a whole, and now we zoomed into Aqshy, and next time we're going to zoom in even further about the city of Brightspear and Asperia, the region it's in. And as always, if you have a question, game masters and players alike, that would be a good resource for your group, please leave it in the description or comments, down below. I'll use your kind of question as fodder for future material, and of course give you credit for it with a little screen capture and shout out and that kind of stuff. Thank you all so much for watching, and happy adventuring. Hey everybody, I hope you enjoyed that video. It was made possible by the folks over here to the left. These are my top supporters over here on YouTube and on Patreon that keep this channel going. If you'd like to learn more about how to become a supporter and get some cool things in the process, like exclusive pictures and interactions with me, and get your questions answered here on the channel, go ahead and click any of the links down below or the join button on the community page over on YouTube. Regardless of your choice, I wanted to thank you so much for joining me with this video, and I look forward to seeing you in my next one. Happy wargaming.